Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland, and behind me is the house where Tubby Clayton lived from the 1920s, more or less up to his death in 1972. This is it. So the Reverend Philip Clayton was born in Australia in 1885, and his parents were British, so they returned to the United Kingdom when Tubby was 2. He was nicknamed Tubby later on, I think at university, meaning fat, although he was actually very slender, so it was a typical British sarcastic joke. So his family were reasonably well off, went to St Paul's School, one of the top schools in the United Kingdom, and when he was there, he had just moved to Barnes, no not to Barnes, sorry, to Hammersmith, considerably further west. He didn't grow up in this house. Anyway, he was very, very distinguished academically. He went to Oxford University, he attended Exeter College, which was not that well known, and he read theology, as in religious studies. He got a first-class degree, which is very rare. Only 10% of people would get a first-class degree. So he could read, obviously Latin and Greek learned at school, but classical Hebrew too. So he could read the Bible in the original language. And he was ordained in the Church of England. So he served in a number of parishes before the First World War broke out. So he was 29 when the war broke out. And by 1915 he was an army chaplain, so he spent a lot of time in France and in Belgium, and he was meeting a lot of these very distressed young men. They'd seen their friends killed, they'd been badly wounded themselves, they'd seen the corpses of enemy soldiers, and they'd witnessed just unspeakable horrors. And when they had leave, they went to towns a few miles behind the lines, and so he was at Popperinge, I think that's how you pronounce it, in Belgium, and he set up what was it called, Talbot House. The Bishop of Winchester's son, the surname was Talbot or Talbot, however you pronounce it, had been killed in the war. Gerald Talbot, if I got that right, and so they called it Talbot House in honour of this young man who had just been killed. Anyway, so this was a place, a drop-in centre for soldiers who were on leave, and he wanted to draw them away from the louche entertainments on offer, which were largely pubs and brothels, and somewhere that they could chat and just have some sort of informal counselling, relax and forget the horrors of war for a few hours. So it became known as Toc H, an abbreviation of Talbot House. Anyway, so all soldiers, whether religious or irreligious, were welcome to come along, and they didn't really push the Christian aspect of it. He wanted to heal whoever they were, and they could be any Christian denomination. Bearing in mind there was a bit of a gulf between Catholics and Protestants in the British Isles in those days. And he made friends with clergymen of other denominations. So he came back to the United Kingdom after the First World War and decided to set up a Toc H in various places, such as here. They were set up in Australia, they were set up in other places like India. I don't think there's any Christian aspect to it in India. But he later became vicar of a church called All Hallows by the Tower. So very close to the Tower of London. You'll see the Tower of London just there. Well, actually, I'm not sure there's enough colour contrast for you. I can see it. Oh, yes, you can see it. But All Hallows by the Tower, is maybe just out of sight, unfortunately. But it's like a 3-minute walk from here. But there are these trees in the way. I'm not going to walk all the way over there. But that was his church. It's behind those trees, unfortunately. You can't see it. He tried to work with people who were living in penury here. We're very close to the East End of London, which was quite an underprivileged area of the city, to raise money for charitable work. He was good friends with Mr. Winnant, who was the American ambassador to the court of St. James in the Second World War. And this area was severely damaged by bombing in the Second World War, and he helped raise funds for the restoration. And he and Winnant, they had a scheme whereby young Americans would come to the UK to do volunteer work, and then young Britishers would go to the United States to do volunteer work. So he lived on until 1972, and that was his idea of living the gospel. But Toc H had 4 principles. I hope I can remember them all, like friendliness and godliness, service, and I can't remember the other one. Is it humility? Something like that. All right, so he was a Christian in the best sense of the word, just trying to help people. The service of God is the true service of is the service of humanity. Yeah, that's what the Sikhs say. Okay, so please follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and choose online lessons with me, including in law. You can see my law channel, which is called English Law. There's a video showing you the link to it elsewhere. That's all. Toodaloo.